Motivation and dedication, especially when you're young today. Many of you might think it's all a bit pointless, isn't it? Why should I stay motivated and dedicated in these times where I don't even know if there's any future that is worth going? But there are people who are a shining and bright example in this working world. And we have some of them. We have one of them actually with us today. Hello and welcome, Matt Mortimer.
Hi there, how are you?
Very good. Thank you very much for taking the time. And I'm getting straight into the topic. We often see that when people, because I know that you work in the events industry, which of course is heavily affected by the COVID pandemic, and you work in major West End shows as far as I've seen so far. And you have a very impressive CV. The usual assumption, especially in the UK, normally now is, okay, from which rich, privileged family does he come from? So can you just tell us something about your background, to tell where you're from, what motivated you to go to this industry, and how your way went?
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Lincolnshire, in a quite a small town, in Spalding, and I kind of fell in love with the arts industry at school level when I was in year 9, and kind of started performing, did a couple of shows, and then saw people in the corner being like, "Oh, what are they doing?" And found out a bit more. And obviously, they were technicians, making sure the show had sound and lights and stage management. And from then on, I kind of picked it up slowly. Obviously, was mentored by a couple of different people from within the school staffing, and kind of took it from there. Spent 2 years at Peterborough Regional College, doing production arts course. It was an extended diploma. And after that, I then decided to look into universities in London, which made sense. This is where kind of most of the industry thrives and is. And I kind of then started at Rosebery College for my 3-year BA honours, which I graduated in 2018. And yeah, 2 and a bit years later, here I am, still in London, thriving with work.
Yeah. And what you didn't mention, because I read your CV before, you also, besides what you said, getting the extended diploma in production arts and then the BA Hons in stage management, you also have, and now I quote from your CV, personal alcohol license holder, emergency first aid at work, COSHH trained, ops management diploma, safeguarding for children, professional development diploma, NCRQ safety for managers, mental health first aider, fire safety level 2, fire warden, restaurant service and management diploma, psychology diploma, and infection prevention and controlled disease controlled diploma, including COVID-19, and you're 23 years old. So what is it? What is it that you do differently? Because many people simply say, I either don't have the time because I work so much, or I don't have the money because I don't have work. So either one way or the other, they say there is no way to get the qualification. And then they normally say this is only for people from wealthier families. And that does not seem to be the trick here. So what did you do differently compared to others?
I mean, I was always very much a hardworking person. My mum's worked, she's a single mum, she's worked all her life to bring me and my older brother up. So you know, we do fall into that middle class category. And I've always tried to prove people wrong.
Okay. And, I like that.
This was almost one of them that drove me a little bit further than I suppose everyone else. I was always one of those people that was like, you can't do this industry, it's going to be too hard, like there's not enough jobs out there. And it was hard. Like it has been hard work. I won't lie to you. It has been quite a tough drive. You know, obviously I've had to do other what we call in the industry muggle jobs. Do bits and pieces like bar work and things like that in between in order to be able to afford to stay in London.
Yeah.
And like with all my skills, I do push myself. I try harder sometimes than what most people would, just to get where I am at today. And my kind of drive and dedication is towards enhancing my CV and myself in order to stand out from the other hundreds of thousands of applicants that a potential company or client is going to see. So I've always tried to push that. And even when I was at university, I completed 2 UK tours one in my second year and one in my third year. Which was...
I remember, because I saw on your CV, when I may interrupt you here, you graduated because you just said, oh, there was some tour. When I look into your CV, so you graduated 2018, which means you're basically the guy who shows up and says, hey, I just graduated. In 2018, you were the technical assistant stage manager at the Brendan Cole All Night Long UK tour. You also were the technical assistant management for Trafalgar Entertainment Group for Misty, which happened at the Trafalgar Studios at the West End, where most people want to arrive after 10 years or more of experience. And you also were the company stage manager for the Cinderella Panto, the event stage manager for a West End Christmas 2018 at St. Paul's Church in London. So these are normally not the typical locations where people say, oh, I graduated and here I am.
No, completely. I mean, I made from my first year, I tried to make as many contacts as I could. I wrote loads of letters to loads of West End shows, being like, "Hey, can I? I'm a student at Bruford's. Can I please come and shadow you for a show and just see how you operate and how you work?" Because it's very different doing it at university where you're still learning, and different to seeing it how it's actually in the industry. So I very much tried to do that for my first year, and then my second year I kind of had those contacts, and a few people were like, hey, willing to give you an opportunity if you're interested, which obviously me being me was like, absolutely. And having to check with like my tutors and things, and they were super supportive of me. Like with Brendan's tour, they were over the 2 years, they were 2-3 month daily touring, which daily touring is extremely difficult. You're doing 18 plus hours a day, get out. So we were on tour buses, so we'd just wake up at the next venue, which was great. And in my second tour, we did have some issues along the way. I had a personal injury, our tour bus burned down. There was loads of things, but with that, we carried on and did the 2-show day the same day that all happened. So it's kind of, with doing those shows, it's kind of built up my resilience a little bit, because it was like, actually, yes, we are still doing this 2-show day. Yes, I am still in shock. Yes, I have just lost all my personal belongings, but you know what? Let's do it. And that was kind of the drive that we all had. It was kind of like, it's got nothing to do with us personally. We've got to get this show on, whether it's one way or another. And I think after that experience, I was it opened my eyes up to be like, yeah, the whole explanation of the show must go on is exactly that. The show has to keep going on, because no matter what happens in your personal life, you've still got to rock up to work and go, right, let's do this.
Excellent attitude. So would you say that it is very important that even during, because you now said you had to talk to your tutors, and many people approach work in a very different way. Many people say, first I do the uni, and then I transition into work, and I start basically on day one after I graduated. So you say it is very crucial that already during university, work experience must be a major part.
Yeah, I believe so, because at the end of the day, it's fine going, okay, you've got a degree, but because of my course and what I do is so practical, it's not just sitting behind a desk doing 9 till 5. It's, you do probably a morning behind a desk, and then the afternoon and evening you could be on set somewhere. And it's so crucial to have that experience, whether it's through other people at university or whatever it may be, because at the end of the day, you need to be able to not just go, yeah, I can do the job because I've got the degree, because it's great having a degree, but
thousands of people graduate every year in exactly that industry. So you're not the only one with that degree.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is, again, it's that whole standing out of the crowd kind of situation where you've got to, when you start handing out your CV when you've graduated, you've got to actually prove that you've almost physically done a job in the industry that's not university. Like, there's so many CVs that I see when I'm employing people for other clients, and so many of it is just lists and lists of in their CV of just the shows that they've done at university and nothing else. And even though, yes, that's great that you've done 20 odd shows at university, but you haven't actually done anything outside of it.
It's not the real world out there, right?
No. It's complicated because like universities are amazing, especially drama schools, because they do teach you everything you need to know. But actually, when you get out there, half the jobs that I would originally be doing as an assistant stage manager that I was taught at university are very different to the actual real life industry.
Yeah.
Like I might only do half of what I've been taught, or I might do double what I've been taught. It completely depends on the size of the show, what it is. And you know, like from looking at my CV, you'll see that some of it I've done like assistant stage manager, and also I've been a merch manager on a tour. You know, you do production stage management. So a lot of the roles in stage and event management is very diverse and kind of intricated, because you're not, some shows you're not just doing that one role, you're doing three. So you've got to be completely versatile, whereas I think university doesn't necessarily teach you to have that level of, okay, I'm doing 3 different show roles on this one job. Whereas at university you only do one or the other, you don't do several at the same time.
Excellent. So when you now say you should get you should get experience while you're at university, there's one question which, of course, when I prepared for this podcast, many people in the creative industry or in the arts industry and events industry asked me, do you think that unpaid work is still part of a career in the industry you work in? Because I have a very different background. In the business world, you work for payment and there is no negotiation. I during my life, never had to work for free. So do you think that in your industry, unpaid work is a necessary part of how to make a career?
I mean, absolutely. Again, you're meeting people that you wouldn't necessarily meet. Like a West End Christmas that I do every year, I've never had any payments from them. That's always been voluntary. I've known that from the offset, and I've been doing it since my first year of university. And I think, you know, doing a West End Christmas, I'm meeting West End professionals every single day when I'm doing that event. And they're all from all the shows all over the West End. It's not just one, it's all of them. So I think, you know, in terms of that, you're meeting people you wouldn't necessarily meet, and your name gets out there. Oh, Matt Mortimer was the stage manager on this, or, you know, and your name gets around, and especially on the touring circuit, because, you know, when I did do the tour with Brendan over those 2 years, we did over 121 venues. And your name gets out there. And I think sometimes you have got to sometimes just do the not so great jobs, such as, you know, unpaid work, obviously within reason, depends on your experience and everything else. But when you're at university level and drama school, you've absolutely sometimes just got to do the unpaid work before you get the paid work. And then money goes up from there, really.
Yeah. So when, of course, and I had the same. When you volunteer for something, you work for free. That's what happened in my life as well. Do you think that people should accept free work from profitable companies, which means a professional show company makes a profit out of a show, and they ask, especially young people, to basically work for free or for the work experience? Do you think that is a viable option for a career, or do you think that is actually ethically okay?
So with that, I disagree with it. If they're making money, then they can afford to pay staff.
Good, fully agree.
And you know, there is some points where I have, even myself, I have been like, some of the students that I know, hey, are you free? You know, I've got this 1-day event. All it is everything will already be set up when you get here. It's just running the show. And it just gives them a bit of show experience that they wouldn't necessarily have, because they'll have done hundreds of get-ins and get-outs with companies for unpaid work, but they will have never have done the actual show. So I sometimes do personally get some students in to help me, but I will always, whether it's come from the company or my own personal finances, I will always pay them back, whether it's getting them lunch for the day or getting them their travel money. Just something small like that actually goes a long way. But I think, if you're completely exploiting students, that's a big no-no for me.
Absolutely, fully agree. Very good to see that there are still standards around, because I've seen some horrible examples, and I hope that these become extinct after COVID-19. But unfortunately, I doubt it. So let's talk about the downsides of having a career. Did you ever have any negative experience? So, for example, you went for a show and it didn't work out. You disagreed with the production company, or maybe facing facing that basically during the way you work together, you simply decide that you won't continue to work together. Did you have any of these experiences? And if so, how do you recover from it? How do you deal with them? Because especially when you're young, I think it's a bit more challenging, isn't it?
Yeah. So in my career so far, and obviously, to protect their identities, I won't say who they are, but I've left 2 companies in my entire career. The first one was the show. I say show role. It was an event, but the show role that they basically put out into the world wasn't quite accurate to what someone of my skill set would do and should do. And within my contract, they had breached multiple differences, from financial through to health and safety.
Yeah. Okay.
I wasn't happy with it. And I voiced all my concerns to my kind of line manager and was like, this isn't right, blah, blah, blah. And my line manager basically said, we'll sort it out yourself. Which isn't the point of the line manager.
No, that's also really bad leadership, I can tell you from my point of view.
Yeah, and it was, and I struggled because at this point I was a recent graduate. I graduated, yes, even though I had all the other experiences, but I think sometimes there's a point where you have to go, actually, I'm here to make money. I'm not here to lose it.
Yeah.
And within this show, I was losing money quite massively, because a lot of the finances that they were offering wasn't covering everything else that they expected from us, such as transport and things like that. And I basically handed my resignation in and was like, look, this just isn't working for me. Like, here's why. And I listed all the issues. I listed everything, conversations that I had with my line manager, who just didn't seem to care. And they basically released me from my contract and sent me on my way.
But even when you said these are the issues and you could prove the issues, they preferred to let you go over dealing with the issues and maybe fixing them.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And so there was almost 30 people in the same role that I was in. And shortly after my resignation, they had probably about another 6 after me.
Yeah.
When I suddenly
normally when someone makes the first step, others follow. That is
and it was and everyone was in the same boat. Everyone was unhappy. Everyone was like, I'm basically, this isn't the job that I signed up for. And which is why the other people followed me out the door almost a few weeks afterwards, after I'd left. And I didn't have any other work. I was planned to work from the start of the summer to the end of the summer on this job, and that's where it was meant to be at. So I obviously had no other work. I was kind of struggling a little bit, and that's where one of my muggle jobs came in. So bar work, got some bar work, and just did that for a few months until I got back up on my feet again and found other freelance work. But sometimes that's just how it goes. That's what you've got to do. You've got to realize that actually you're worth more sometimes than some of the companies can provide, and you need to filter out the good companies from the bad sometimes. And I do strongly believe that the company had every intention thinking they were in the right. But unfortunately, there's just some companies that will always think that, and they aren't always necessarily right. And it took me having to be like, okay, here's your faults. Like, you have no fire safety planning or anything like that for a massive event of this size. And then them suddenly a few weeks later correcting it. And it was like, well, it should have already been done before we started, not...
Yeah, also that, I mean, no fire safety comes with a massive liability issue. And when something is going to happen, believe me, they are going to question your role.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why I had to take a step back, because I was like, actually, it's not just the safety of me, it's the safety of everyone around me, from staff to public. And that's why I kind of had to take a step back from it, because I was like, I don't agree with anything right now. So that was a big part for me, is I take, obviously within my job, health and safety is number one. And with this company, it was almost like it was the last place. They were more interested in making money than they were having everyone safe. Like, we were never given, so every place we went, there was, because it was a touring event, every place we went, there was never any fire safety for us as staff. We all had like radios or occasional.
I mean, especially in, maybe it's just me being picky here, but especially in London, when it comes to fire safety, do people forget that quickly that we had, I mean, a major fire incident in South Kensington, as far as I remember, and people really still think that they can get away with having no security and fire plans.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing providing all the documents, going, yeah, we've got it in place, but it's very much another thing going, okay, staff, if there's a fire, this is the meeting point and assembly point. And they didn't even do that. Every venue, every like place we went to, there was never like, okay, if there is a fire, there'll be a massive bell or anything like that, which there then suddenly was after I left a few weeks later. And there was a massive screen that flashed up saying that this is an evacuation. So obviously they didn't have any of that in place when I was there. And then suddenly after my letter a few weeks later, it was all suddenly in place.
Okay.
So it was an interesting job. But yeah, I don't like to have my name on something that could cause harm to others. Whether it's health and safety or otherwise. But like I said, like it was more than just that. It was, they messed up the financial side. We were doing double the hours, and it wasn't the job title that they had put out there. So anyway, so that was the first one that I kind of left. And the second one was quite similar. It was a touring show. The company was basically trying to put in massive sets for a daily touring show, which in my industry, okay, you try and do what you want, absolutely. But the producer just had no sense of realization that actually that is what it is. It is a touring show. It's only meant to be minimal set to get you through the show. You're not meant to have a full scale show in there. So I fell out with the producer, and without going into too much more detail, health and safety of the technicians were at risk, and obviously it's hard, and I understand from a financial standpoint for companies that actually crew and technical staff aren't treated as fairly as our performer counterparts, but unfortunately they're the money makers. We aren't, in that sense. Yes, you do still need us to run the show. Yes, you do still need lighting and sound and everything else, but we're not the face that's going on stage every night.
Yeah.
So sometimes that's tricky, because sometimes we get kind of the short stick of having to share loads of rooms in hotels, or we'll finish the get out and then have to travel 5 hours down the road after doing like a 20, I think it was a 21-hour day that day. So for me, I can handle, obviously, like both of these were after I had done Brendan's shows, and I was like, I can handle anything from Brendan's shows, daily touring. But with these, it just felt like it was a never-ending couple of weeks for something that should have lasted all kind of summer. But yeah, I just couldn't. I was like, the health and safety is at risk. Morals are at risk. Loads of the performers are actually seeing us almost pass out backstage because we're that exhausted, and there's no sense of working time directive or anything like that. So they were both tricky and both very similar in the same sense.
So it is still in place, because that is something which, of course, I am not a professional in the events industry, but that's what I often assume, that of course, people want to. Well, no employer and no company running a show wants to have bad PR where it says you treat your staff horribly. On the other hand, I know that often, especially people who are in charge of financials say, well, every countermeasure we do is basically a cost we have, so we cut it as low as possible. Is that still very common, or does it get less and less because maybe the whole attitude towards it changes, or is it as bad as some people might think?
I think it depends. Again, you have the great companies and you have some really bad ones. And usually the bad ones are because of lack of experience. But I mean, you know, it's always going to be hit and miss. You're never going to have a perfect industry. Unfortunately, that's just not how it works. If it was, everything would be great all the time. But you know, you deal with various different companies. You deal with various different sizes of companies. Like I've dealt with small companies where it's just the one person who's the producer, and everyone else is freelance within their staff. And I've also dealt with massive companies where I'm speaking to hundreds of different people just to get my invoice paid. So, you hit different positions with different companies, and I'm not one to kind of go, right, yes, I've worked in the West End, but that's where I want to stay for the rest of my life. Like I like challenges. I find them exciting. I worked in the Middle East at the start of last year and in November of 2019, and I absolutely loved it. Like there were completely new challenges. Broken Wings was an amazing musical to do. It kind of challenged me a little bit because they were different countries and they both, Dubai and Doha, work in very different ways. So it was, you know, things like that excite me because it's a new challenge. And I love new challenges, which is why, you know, I tend to try and do, like, I'm very much I'm not an academic. I do enjoy the practical side of a lot of things. But with my certificates, that's where I try and boost myself a little bit because that
will be my next question, because you said you're not an academic while having an academic degree. And then you do all these diplomas, because my next question would actually be, why did you do, because I don't think that any employer is going to pay you for these diplomas. That's all your private payment, isn't it? You pay for that.
Yeah, exactly.
So why did you do them? What is the advantage of having them?
So I think at drama school, you are basically given your first 3-year emergency first aid at work and kind of your basics. And because I was on tour when in third year when that happened, I basically didn't get that qualification. And there are some companies out there that will expect that as kind of a minimum, because, you know, we are in a management position. We are expected to be able to do first aid of some kind. So I then I got that a couple of years back, my emergency first aid at work from Opera Holland Park, who I am working with later this year. They're an amazing company, and they expect all of their staff, not just management, to have that qualification. And they paid for that, which was absolutely amazing, which they didn't need to do, but it was great. It's great to have now. But all my other qualifications I've got on my own. And again, I'm one of those people that love a new challenge, but also if I'm dedicated into it, like I've always been interested in kind of health and safety. I've always been interested in kind of the emergency services as a whole. And so, like, I mean, even my mum would say, you know, you always used to carry like blue gloves around with you when you was a child, pretending to be a doctor. But you know, that was always something for me. Like, I always want to do better and be better, because, you know, I would never. I'm not the type of person to walk in a room and look down on anyone because they haven't got them. But actually, if I can inspire just one other person in my life, then I'm absolutely going to do that. But I'm not I wouldn't classify myself as an academic just because I've got those qualifications and it's hard for them. I'm not. If you put me in an exam tomorrow, I'd probably fail all of them.
Well, I think that applies to basically anyone who ever went to uni. We all know if we had to do, or just talking about a driver's license test or whatever, we wouldn't pass these exams if someone asked us to do them tomorrow. No question about that. Talking about inspiring others, I remember that I think that your college called you back in to give a speech to others who think about having a career in the industry. Is that correct?
My secondary school did, yes.
Oh, your secondary school, yeah. So when now people, to round this interview up, one last question I have. When now people think about, I think this is an industry which interests me. I think this is a career I'd like to have. I think this is a career path I'm striving to be excellent at. So what are Matt Mortimer's top 3 tips for people who think about a career in your industry? Your top 3 tips.
My top 3 would probably be strive to work harder than anyone else in the room. The second one would probably be just stay focused but energetic on everyone and everything around you. Our industry is constantly changing every single day. And there's always going to be someone who has more skills than you do, and will always try harder than you, which pushes you even further. And my third one would be, if you're passionate enough to want something, go out there and get it. Whether it's this industry or another industry, you will always fall in love with your passions, which will make you do better, which is absolutely what I did. I was told that I could never do this industry and it just wouldn't work, and that there was no jobs out there. And obviously here I am soaring and just doing it, because I put my all into it. I put my passion, my love, my attention, my care into this industry.
Excellent. These are perfect final words. That at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing for me left to say. Matt, thank you very much for your time.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.